Have you ever noticed how your presence is taken for granted until your absence cuts through the room like silence after thunder? Respect, for many, doesn't awaken when you give, when you sacrifice, when you stay. It awakens only when you withdraw. It is in the moment you close the door, not when you keep it open, that others suddenly remember your worth. This truth is heavy, almost cruel, because it tells us something about human nature most of us don't want to believe. People don't cherish consistency. They crave scarcity. We spend years giving our time, our love, our loyalty, believing that by proving ourselves others will value us. Yet often the opposite happens. The more available you are, the more invisible you become. Your kindness is mistaken for weakness, your patience mistaken for passivity, and your loyalty mistaken for dependence. But the instant you walk away, the moment you reclaim yourself, suddenly the same people who dismissed you begin to look at you with new eyes. It is in absence that your presence is finally felt. And the question is not, why are they like this? The real question is, why did we allow ourselves to stay where we were not seen? Human beings are far less rational than we like to believe. Our relationships, our loyalties, our respect for others are rarely governed by fairness or gratitude. More often they are shaped by instincts older than logic. We value what we fear to lose, and we overlook what we believe will always remain. This is why the friend who answers every call becomes background noise, while the one who withdraws their attention suddenly appears precious. It is not malice, it is conditioning. Familiarity dulls appreciation. The more accessible something is, the less mysterious it feels. The more predictable someone becomes, the less magnetic they seem. You might pour yourself endlessly into people, thinking it will make them love you more, but instead it teaches them that your energy has no cost, that your presence requires no effort to keep. That illusion of permanence is what blinds others to your true value. Machiavelli observed that people are moved by necessity more than by affection. In his eyes, a ruler who was feared but absent inspired more obedience than one who was endlessly merciful and ever-present. While his philosophy was harsh, it carried an uncomfortable truth. People respect what they cannot control, what they feel they might lose, what they must earn, rather than what is freely given. Psychology agrees. Scarcity elevates perception. When something becomes rare, our minds assign it greater value. This is why limited editions sell out faster, why art locked away in galleries seems priceless, and why the person who suddenly withdraws is seen in a new light. Respect in this way often has less to do with your inherent worth and more to do with the power dynamics created by presence and absence. The misconception we often fall into is believing that endless giving will awaken respect. We think, if I am loyal enough, if I am kind enough, if I stay long enough, eventually others will realize my worth. But reality does not work this way. The more consistently we overextend ourselves, the more others begin to normalize it. They stop noticing the sacrifice. They stop recognizing the effort. What once was a gift becomes an expectation. Soon, silence meets your kindness, and indifference meets your loyalty. The irony is brutal. By staying and proving ourselves, we unintentionally teach others that our energy is disposable. It is not until we stop, until we pull back, that the illusion shatters. Then, and only then, does respect awaken, not because they suddenly grew wiser, but because scarcity has replaced familiarity. This creates an inner conflict for us, because walking away feels unnatural when our hearts crave connection. We want to be valued for what we give while we are still giving, not after we leave. We want to be loved in our presence, not remembered in our absence. And yet the structure of human psychology resists this. Think of the air we breathe, essential, life-giving, yet almost invisible to us until it is taken away. Respect functions in much the same way. As long as you remain available without condition, you blend into the background of others' lives. But once you reclaim yourself, once you choose to withhold, the very same presence that seemed ordinary suddenly feels extraordinary. You did not change in value, only their perception shifted. This is why conflict arises between our emotional desires and the reality of human behavior. On one hand, we long for unconditional respect. On the other, we live in a world where respect often flows from scarcity and distance. It feels unjust, almost insulting, that those who remain loyal are overlooked, while those who withhold are revered. Yet if we examine it closely, this tension exposes a deep truth about human nature. People respect boundaries more than they respect sacrifice. They respect the one who knows when to say no, when to step back, when to demand dignity through absence. The problem is not that they don't see your value. It is that you never gave them a reason to confront the possibility of losing it. Familiarity is a double-edged sword. It creates comfort, intimacy, and connection, but it also dulls sharpness, blurs edges, and softens urgency. Over time, the things we see every day fade into the background of our awareness. This is why the constant generosity of a parent is unappreciated until the child grows older and understands sacrifice. It is why the endless patience of a partner goes unnoticed until the day they stop waiting. We live inside cycles where devotion becomes invisible until distance transforms it into something undeniable. This pattern repeats across friendships, relationships, careers, and families, reminding us that respect is not always about what you give, but about how you guard what you give. The very act of holding yourself back, of not always being available, disrupts the numbing effect of familiarity. And so, the conflict at the heart of this theme is not just external but internal. It is the struggle between wanting to remain endlessly available to those we love and realizing that availability can destroy appreciation. It is the tension between believing in unconditional loyalty and recognizing that conditional presence often commands deeper respect. It is painful because it forces us to face a truth that seems unfair. People often see your worth most clearly when they fear your absence, but rather than despair at this truth, it can be used as a mirror, a reminder that walking away is not merely about them, but about you. It is about breaking the cycle of being overlooked. It is about showing not through words, but through silence, that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. Think of the countless times you have carried the weight of a friendship where you were the one always reaching out. You initiated the conversations, planned the meetings, remembered the birthdays, and offered your ear when the storms in their life grew heavy. Yet when silence came from your end, the silence remained unbroken. They did not notice the absence of your call. They did not question the distance, and it is only later, when you withdrew completely, that they said with a faint sense of surprise, "You've changed." But the truth is, you did not change. You simply stopped doing what they silently expected you to keep doing forever. This is the sting of realization. Your effort was never truly seen until it ceased. It is a universal experience that eats at the heart, because what we thought was mutual care was only one-sided devotion disguised as reciprocity. There is an almost unbearable clarity when you look back on relationships that once defined your life. The love you poured in, the sacrifices you made, the ways you molded yourself to fit the needs of another. All of it seemed invisible at the time. You hoped they would one day pause and say, "I see you. I appreciate you." But often that acknowledgement never came. Only when you pulled away, only when you chose silence over words, did they feel the emptiness you had always carried. Suddenly, the same people who dismissed your presence became restless in your absence. They sent messages, they asked questions, they wondered what happened. The truth is simple. Nothing happened. You only stopped sacrificing pieces of yourself for people who treated your devotion as air, necessary but unnoticed until gone. Workplaces are perhaps the sharpest mirrors of this reality. You may have worked tirelessly, showing up early, staying late, carrying burdens quietly because you believed diligence would earn recognition. Yet days turned to months, months to years, and your efforts blended into the background like wallpaper. The compliments never came. The gratitude was sparse. But the day you resigned, the moment you placed your letter on the desk, suddenly your worth became clear. We didn't realize how much you did. We didn't realize how much you carried. These words arrive not as comfort, but as a wound, because they reveal how little attention was paid until your departure forced it. Respect awakened, but too late. This cycle repeats endlessly across careers, effort overlooked, until absence makes the truth undeniable. Even within families, this painful rhythm unfolds. The parent who gives endlessly, providing stability and care, is often invisible to the children until time has passed, until the parent's voice grows softer with age or disappears altogether. What once was seen as natural, almost automatic, becomes revered only in hindsight. "I didn't realize what you did for me," becomes the refrain long after the sacrifices were made. The partner who endures silently, who bends and compromises without acknowledgement, is suddenly idealized after leaving, when their presence becomes a memory rather than a reality. This delayed recognition cuts deeply, because it forces us to ask, why must my worth be proven through absence? Why can it not be honored while I am still here, still offering, still present? It is in these experiences that transformation begins. The hurt of being overlooked forces us to see patterns we once denied. We begin to notice that love which demands endless giving without acknowledgement is not love, but dependence. We begin to recognize that friendships which flourish only through our constant effort are not true connections, but obligations wearing the mask of loyalty. These moments of clarity break the illusions we built around others. They shatter the fantasy that patience, sacrifice, and devotion will inevitably lead to recognition. Instead, they teach us a harsher but freeing truth. Respect is not earned by doing more. It is revealed by doing less, by stepping back, by letting silence speak in ways words never could. The emotions tied to these realizations are not light. There is grief in walking away. There is anger at the years of energy poured into people who could not see your worth. There is confusion as you replay memories and wonder whether the bond was ever real. Yet beneath this storm lies something powerful: awakening. The first time you walk away and someone finally sees you clearly, you feel both the sting of their delayed recognition and the strength of reclaiming your value. You realize that your presence is not cheap, that your loyalty is not to be handed out endlessly, that your love is not an obligation, but a gift. This awakening does not erase the pain, but it transforms it into fuel. In the end, the most relatable experience of all is this: you are not alone in this cycle. Everyone at some point has been unseen in their presence and cherished only in their absence. It is one of the oldest stories of the human heart. Yet while it hurts, it also frees, because once you see the truth, you cannot return to the illusions. You learn to hold back what once flowed endlessly. You learn to stand firm where you once bent. You learn that the relationships worth keeping are not those that wake up only when you leave, but those that see you, hear you, value you while you are still there. And in that recognition, painful though it may be, lies the beginning of self-respect, the seed of a new strength that no absence can ever erase. There comes a moment when the act of walking away no longer feels like defeat, but like liberation. At first it is terrifying. You imagine the silence, the emptiness, the possible loneliness. You wonder if your absence will even be noticed. But slowly, the fear gives way to something else, something deeper: strength. Walking away is not running from the battlefield. It is choosing not to fight in wars that wound your soul. It is the act of reclaiming your dignity piece by piece. You begin to feel the shift inside you, as if a heavy chain has fallen away, and you realize that what you thought was keeping you connected was actually keeping you captive. This is the awakening, when solitude begins to taste like peace, when silence feels like music, when your own company becomes enough. It is in those quiet hours of solitude that your scars begin to whisper their lessons. Every disappointment, every betrayal, every overlooked effort becomes a mark on your soul, not as a reminder of weakness, but as proof of survival. You touch those invisible scars and realize they are not symbols of loss. They are evidence of endurance. They tell the story of how you gave, how you loved, how you sacrificed, and how you finally chose yourself. In the beginning, scars look like wounds, raw and painful, but with time they transform into maps, guiding you toward a deeper understanding of your own worth. The awakening is not in denying the pain, but in embracing it, letting it remind you that you are unbreakable, that even in silence your soul speaks loudly. The imagery of light becomes essential here. You start to notice it differently. Light seeping through cracks in the darkness, light flickering in your own reflection, light in the smallest acts of self-respect. Before, you sought light in others, hoping their recognition would illuminate your worth. Now, you discover that the flame was within you all along. Walking away doesn't extinguish the world. It reveals the fire you carried inside. This is why silence becomes powerful, not because it punishes others, but because it awakens you to yourself. In the stillness of absence, you hear your own voice more clearly. You begin to understand that your presence was never meant to be begged for, that your value does not decrease when ignored, and that your dignity is found not in their applause but in your own acceptance of self. Awakening also reshapes your relationship with solitude. Where once loneliness felt like a void, it now becomes a sanctuary. Solitude stops being a punishment and becomes a sacred space where you are whole without external validation. In this quiet place, you are no longer bending to fit expectations, no longer performing to win favor, no longer sacrificing authenticity for belonging. Instead, you begin to rebuild. You rediscover old dreams you silenced, passions you abandoned, pieces of yourself you neglected while trying to hold others together. Solitude, once feared, becomes fertile soil for rebirth. It is here that you realize strength does not mean having people around you. It means standing unshaken, even when no one claps, no one notices, no one affirms. The scars, the solitude, the silence, together they carve out a version of you that is unshakable. You stop chasing after recognition and begin carrying yourself differently. There is a new steadiness in your steps, a new calm in your eyes. Others might not understand it at first, but they feel it. The aura of someone who has walked through fire and did not collapse cannot be faked. You begin to radiate a quiet authority, a self-respect that does not need words. People who once overlooked you now pause. They sense the shift, even if they cannot name it. This is the paradox. When you no longer demand their respect, when you no longer beg for their validation, it is then that they finally begin to offer it. But by this point, you no longer need it. There is something sacred about realizing that walking away was not about punishing others, but about healing yourself. The awakening is not revenge, it is rebirth. It is the deep knowing that your worth was never diminished by their blindness, that their failure to see you did not erase your light. What changes is not their perception, it is your own. You stop asking, why didn't they respect me, and instead declare, I respect myself too much to remain unseen. The internal shift is profound, because it takes you out of the cycle of begging for recognition and places you firmly in the realm of self-dignity. The respect you were chasing outwardly becomes the respect you cultivate inwardly, and that changes everything. Ultimately, the greatest strength you uncover is the ability to let go without bitterness, to walk away not with rage, but with grace, to close the door softly, carrying no malice, only clarity. This is the highest form of awakening, when your silence is not about making them notice, but about honoring your own soul. You no longer seek to prove your value through absence, you simply embody it through presence. Your own presence with yourself, and in that sacred alignment you discover that true respect begins and ends with you. What others finally see is irrelevant, because the most powerful recognition has already taken place in the quiet sanctuary of your own heart. So when respect only appears after you walk away, you begin to realize it was never about their vision, it was about your own. For years you may have begged silently for acknowledgement, offering your presence as proof, as sacrifice, as devotion, and yet the lesson whispers louder each time. Respect delayed is respect denied. The awakening is not to wait for them to finally notice, but to notice yourself before it's too late. Walking away is not abandonment, it is reclamation. It is the quiet declaration that you will no longer trade your dignity for their convenience, no longer give endlessly to be seen half-heartedly. This realization, though painful, becomes the seed of something transformative, a revolution that begins not in the outer world, but within your soul. The real revolution is always inward. It is not about forcing others to value you. It is about valuing yourself so deeply that their blindness no longer wounds you. When you decide to stop chasing validation, when you stop needing their applause, something miraculous happens. You free yourself from their grip. You begin to see that your worth is not a negotiation, not a fragile currency to be traded in moments of recognition. It is constant, unshakable, eternal. The revolution is in choosing to live from that truth, regardless of whether others ever wake up to it. And when you stand in that inner certainty, life itself begins to change. The relationships you allow shift. The energy you give sharpens. The spaces you walk into begin to mirror the strength you carry inside. This clarity creates a new form of peace. You no longer scramble for crumbs of acknowledgement, no longer beg for the scraps of attention that once left you starving. Instead, you feast on the silence of your own strength. The loudest voice is no longer theirs. It is your own heart whispering, "I am enough." The world notices in its own time, perhaps too late, perhaps never. But it doesn't matter anymore because you are no longer playing to their rhythm. You are creating your own music, walking at your own pace, living in alignment with your own worth. This is freedom. To be free not just from toxic people, but from the toxic belief that your value depends on them at all. In this liberation, your steps grow lighter, your presence grows brighter, and your absence no longer carries bitterness, it carries grace. And here is the paradox. When you stop demanding respect, you attract it effortlessly. When you stop clinging, you create space for others to reach toward you. When you no longer sacrifice yourself to prove your worth, others are compelled to honor it. But by the time they do, you will have grown beyond the need for it. That is the beauty of the journey. The respect you once chased becomes irrelevant because you have already crowned yourself with something far more powerful. Self-respect. And that crown cannot be removed, cannot be stolen, cannot be diminished. It shines quietly, not in arrogance, but in truth. It is not loud, but it is undeniable. The revolution, then, is not about them. It is about you. It is about realizing that the true battlefield is internal. Your greatest victory is not in making them see your worth, but in refusing to forget it yourself. The call to action is not to beg, not to plead, not to wait for recognition, but to rise. To rise silently, gracefully, without spectacle, to rise in dignity, in clarity, in self-respect. That is the revolution the world fears, because a person who no longer chases validation is untouchable. They cannot be controlled, manipulated, or diminished. They move differently, they speak differently, they breathe differently, and in their presence, even silence becomes powerful. So the final reflection is this. The real respect you need has always been yours to give. The journey was never about convincing others, it was about convincing yourself. Respect born of absence may open their eyes, but respect born of presence will forever sustain yours. And so, walk away when you must, not to teach them, but to free yourself. Walk away not in anger, but in clarity. Walk away not with noise, but with silence so profound it becomes its own sermon. Let your absence speak, yes, but let your presence with yourself speak louder. And when the world finally notices what they lost, smile quietly, because you already found what truly matters. You.